There are moments in politics when a story breaks. Not on the floor of Congress, not in a press briefing, not through official channels, but through a single person stepping forward with a claim that nobody in power was prepared for. This is one of those moments. Kristi Noem is not just any political figure right now. She is the Secretary of Homeland Security of the United States of America. She oversees the most powerful border enforcement operation in the world. She is one of the most visible faces of Donald Trump's second administration. She sits at the intersection of immigration, national security, and executive power. And in Washington, when someone at that level becomes the subject of a personal controversy, the ripple effects are never just personal. So when a model came forward with shocking allegations involving Noem's husband, Brian Noem, the story immediately became bigger than the individuals involved. It became a question about power, proximity to the presidency, and how personal scandals can quietly reshape political careers in ways that policy debates never could. Let's break this down fully, because the surface story is just the beginning. Kristi Noem has been one of Donald Trump's most loyal allies for years. She built her national profile as the governor of South Dakota, largely by refusing COVID lockdowns when nearly every other governor in the country folded under pressure. That one decision made her a conservative icon almost overnight. She became a regular presence at Trump rallies, a fixture on Fox News, and a name that was seriously floated as a potential vice presidential pick before J.D. Vance ultimately got the nod. When Trump returned to the White House in 2025, Noem was rewarded with one of the most consequential cabinet positions available, Homeland Security. Her husband, Brian Noem, has remained largely in the background of her public life. In American politics, spouses of cabinet officials rarely attract national headlines unless something goes significantly wrong, and that is exactly the situation that is now unfolding. A model, a woman operating in an industry that frequently intersects with wealth, influence, and high-profile social circles, has come forward with claims about Brian Noem that have sent shockwaves through political media. The details of those claims are serious enough that they could not simply be dismissed or buried. They surfaced publicly, they began circulating through major news outlets, and they landed at exactly the wrong moment for an administration that is already navigating enormous political pressure on multiple fronts. Now, here is the part most coverage skips over, the deeper structural reason why this matters beyond the personal drama. When you hold a position like Secretary of Homeland Security, your entire authority rests on a foundation of credibility. Your staff must believe in your judgment. Your political allies must feel confident standing beside you. The president who appointed you must feel that the political cost of keeping you is lower than the political cost of replacing you. That is the silent calculation happening in Washington right now. Not in any public statement, not in any press release, but in the private conversations between advisors, chiefs of staff, and political operatives who understand that in Trump's world, loyalty runs both ways, but it is never unconditional. Trump himself has a complex relationship with scandal. He has survived allegations and controversies that would have ended the careers of virtually any other politician in modern American history. But there is a critical distinction between Trump surviving his own controversies and Trump choosing to absorb the political cost of someone else's controversy. Those are two completely different calculations. And the people closest to Trump know this better than anyone. The model's claims, regardless of how they are ultimately adjudicated, have created something that political operatives genuinely fear: a persistent distraction. Washington runs on narrative control. Every day that Noem is being asked about her husband's personal life is a day she is not projecting strength and authority on immigration enforcement. Every cable news segment that features this story is a segment that is not covering deportation numbers, border statistics, or policy wins that the administration wants amplified. Distraction in politics is not a minor inconvenience. It is a form of damage. There is also a dimension to this story that touches on how women in political leadership are evaluated differently than their male counterparts. This is not a partisan observation. It is a structural reality that has been documented repeatedly across political history. When a female cabinet official becomes associated with personal controversy, even controversy that originates with her spouse and not with her own conduct, the scrutiny she faces is qualitatively different. Her judgment gets questioned, her household stability gets analyzed, her ability to focus on the job becomes a topic of public debate in ways that would rarely happen to a male official in the same position. Noem's team has been working aggressively to contain the narrative, but containing a narrative in the modern media environment, where social media accelerates every story and political opponents will amplify anything that creates discomfort for the other side, is exponentially harder than it was even a decade ago. The model's claims have already been widely shared. They have already generated the kind of online engagement that algorithms reward. They are not going away quietly. For the people most directly affected by this story, the impact is layered and uneven. For Brian Noem, these are allegations that strike at his personal character and his marriage. For Kristi Noem, this is a professional crisis wrapped inside a personal one, and she is having to manage both simultaneously while holding down one of the most demanding roles in the federal government. For the Trump administration, this is a test of how it handles internal turbulence at a moment when it is trying to project strength and decisiveness on every front simultaneously. And for the American public, and particularly the voters who elevated Trump and Noem on the promise of accountability and strong moral leadership, this story creates a moment of uncomfortable cognitive dissonance. Political movements built around traditional values and personal integrity face a unique credibility challenge when figures at the center of those movements become entangled in exactly the kind of personal controversies those movements claim to stand against. That is not a partisan attack. That is simply the political physics of how credibility works. There is also a longer arc here worth understanding. Kristi Noem's public image took a significant hit in 2024, well before this controversy, when her book revealed that she had shot and killed her own dog. That single anecdote generated an astonishing backlash, not because of complex policy disagreement, but because it struck many ordinary people as a revelation of character. She recovered from it, partly because Trump stood by her, and partly because her appointment to DHS gave her a platform to reestablish herself around a tough-on-immigration identity that plays well with the base. But reputation, like credit, works on a cumulative basis. The more incidents accumulate, even unrelated ones, the more the overall narrative around a public figure begins to calcify into something that becomes very difficult to reverse. Political operatives call this the drip. Individual drops of controversy may not sink a career, but a consistent drip over time erodes even the strongest political foundations. What happens next depends on several factors that are currently in motion. The first is whether the model's claims gain legal traction. Allegations made publicly and privately are very different in their consequences. If these claims move from the media environment into a legal environment, the calculus changes completely. The second factor is Trump himself, whether he signals publicly or privately that he continues to back Noem fully, or whether those around him begin to quietly distance themselves. In Washington, silence from allies is often the first signal of a coming realignment. The third factor is Noem's own response. Whether she handles this with the kind of composed, direct communication that diffuses political fires, or whether inconsistency and defensiveness allow the story to grow larger than it needs to be. The model at the center of this story is also in a position that carries enormous personal risk. Coming forward with claims against the spouse of a sitting cabinet member in a politically charged environment is not a decision made lightly. Whether her motivation is personal truth-telling, legal strategy, public interest, or something more complex, the act of coming forward has already changed the trajectory of multiple people's lives, and the full consequences of that are still unfolding. What this story ultimately teaches us, and this is the point that gets lost when coverage stays at the surface level, is how fragile the architecture of political power actually is. We see cabinet officials and assume permanence. We see loyalty to a president and assume protection. We see someone at the top of their career and assume stability. But in reality, political standing is built on perception, and perception can shift faster than any policy can be implemented. One story, one person stepping forward, one conversation that should have stayed private becoming public, and suddenly the entire structure has to be stress-tested in ways nobody anticipated. Donald Trump built his political brand on projecting invulnerability. His cabinet, by extension, is expected to project the same thing. Moments like this one, messy, personal, impossible to fully control, are reminders that invulnerability is always a performance, and that the human realities beneath every political figure's public surface are always waiting for a moment to break through. The question is not whether Kristi Noem survives this. In Washington, survival is usually a matter of timing, loyalty, and who else is available to fill your role. The question is what this moment reveals about the relationship between personal life and public power, and whether we, as an audience watching this unfold, are willing to think critically about both, rather than simply choosing a side based on the team jersey being worn. Because the most powerful thing politics does is make us forget that every person inside it is, first and last, a human being, capable of the same fractures, the same consequences, and the same reckoning as anyone else, and that truth is more important than any headline.